It was early. Too early for anything to feel off yet. But something did. The sun hadn't even broken the horizon fully when I stepped into the kitchen. I'd just gotten home from a 3-day trip to Dallas. Meetings, client dinners, long hours, nothing exciting. I didn't even stop at the bedroom. Just went straight for coffee. I was still rolling my suitcase behind me when I noticed the wine glasses. 2 of them. One on either side of the table, like a scene from some impromptu date night. One glass had lipstick on the rim. Hers. That was expected. But the other was different. A faint smear of fingerprints on the bowl, heavier near the stem. Still warm. The kind of warmth that doesn't linger more than an hour or 2. Next to the glass was something that didn't belong in our home. A black, structured jacket, maybe wool or corduroy. Definitely a man's. I stepped closer to get a better look, and the smell hit me. Not immediately, but subtly earthy, musky cologne with a sharp citrusy twist. Not mine. Not even close to anything I'd wear. I didn't touch it. Just stood there staring at it like it might explain itself if I waited long enough. That's when I realized the bathroom fan was humming. It was faint, just enough to notice if you were already paying attention. And something about that sound pulled me down the hallway like a thread tugging at the back of my neck. The door was half open. Steam poured out in a lazy curl and hung in the air like a cloud that hadn't been given permission to settle. Inside, the mirror was still fogged up, and the tile floor was slightly damp with footprints, bare, adult-sized, leading away from the bath mat. A fresh shower. Maybe 15 minutes ago. Tops. Someone had been here. Someone other than her. And someone other than me. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough to start connecting dots I didn't want to connect. The jacket, the wine, the cologne, the steam. Each detail felt innocent on its own, but together they painted something ugly. Just as I turned away, I heard the front door. Keys jingling, the deadbolt sliding. I stood in the hallway, back half-lit by the bathroom glow as Maggie walked in. She had her phone in one hand and a small canvas bag over her shoulder. Her hair was up in a quick bun, the kind she always wore when she was running errands or just trying not to be noticed. But her eyes widened for a split second when she saw me. It was brief, but it was there. "You're back early," she said. A little too upbeat, like she was covering for something she hadn't prepared for. I didn't say anything, just watched her. She shut the door behind her and walked into the kitchen. She saw the glasses first, then the jacket. She froze. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't gasp or start making excuses right away. But there was a beat. A long, silent second where her entire posture changed. That was the moment I knew whatever came next wasn't going to be the truth. It was going to be a version of it, one that had been polished just enough to sound believable. She turned to me, sighing softly like she just realized she had to clean up someone else's mess. "That's Derek's jacket," she said. "He stopped by last night to help me with the thermostat. It was acting up again, and you know how I am with that stuff." Her voice was light, like this was all normal. "Derek?" I repeated. "Yeah, you've met him. From the HOA meetings? I told you last week the heater's been weird." He offered to take a look. She moved to pick up the jacket, folding it over her arm like it was completely unimportant. The scent from it bloomed stronger as she lifted it. I nodded slowly. "Right? The thermostat." She chuckled awkwardly, placing the jacket over the back of a chair. "I didn't realize it was that late until we finished. I figured I'd run out for some bagels this morning. Thought I'd surprise you." Bagels. As if I'd forget the smell of another man's cologne still hanging in the air inside our bathroom. As if I didn't know the difference between helping someone fix a thermostat and staying long enough to drink wine, shower, and leave behind personal clothing. But I didn't call her on it. Not yet. There was a part of me still hoping there was an explanation that made sense. That maybe I was overreacting. That maybe the wine, the jacket, the cologne, they could all be explained away with just the right combination of trust and gullibility. She walked over and kissed me lightly on the cheek. "You okay?" she asked, still wearing that casual smile. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I shrugged. "Didn't sleep much." She nodded, poured herself a glass of water, and started unpacking the bag she brought in. A half-dozen bagels, some cream cheese, 2 paper cups of coffee, one for me, one for her. She played the part well. No nervous glances, no stammering. Just calm, cool control. But something had changed. It wasn't just what I saw. It was what I felt. A shift in atmosphere, like the air between us had thickened. I couldn't tell if it was guilt I saw on her face or just mild annoyance that she'd been caught off guard. I watched her carefully, cataloging every movement. Her nonchalance, her pacing, the way she filled the silence with chatter. "So how was Dallas?" she asked, back-turned, her voice cheery. "It was fine," I said flatly. "That client, Waverly Tech? Did you end up closing the deal?" I nodded. "Yeah, we're launching the pilot program next month." She turned, smiled at me. "That's great, babe. Really." I studied her smile. I knew it well, but for the first time it didn't feel right. It didn't quite reach her eyes. That morning I didn't say anything else. I went upstairs, unpacked my suitcase slowly, took a shower, and changed clothes. All the while, the jacket kept flashing through my mind. The wine glasses, the damp bathroom floor. Maggie acted like none of it mattered, but I'd already begged and pulling threads in my head. Quietly, methodically. I didn't want to believe it yet, not without more. But the seed was planted. The odd thing was how calm I felt, like I'd walked into a play halfway through and already knew how it ended. I didn't feel rage, or heartbreak, or desperation, just distance. Like I was watching something unravel from a few steps away, not quite ready to touch it. I wrote it all down later that day. Not in a notebook or in some dramatic journal, just a note on my phone. A list. 2 wine glasses. One still warm. Man's jacket. Black. Slight cologne smell. Bathroom fan on. Steam lingering. Fresh footprints. Maggie out for bagels before 6 a.m. Mention Derek. Thermostat excuse. Calm, no guilt in tone. I didn't know what I'd do with the list yet, but I had a feeling I'd be adding to it. That same evening, after Maggie had fallen asleep with the TV still murmuring in the background, I sat in my car in the garage for over an hour. No music, no calls. Just me, hands on the wheel, staring at the dashboard clock as the minutes ticked by. I wasn't sure why I couldn't bring myself to go inside right away. Maybe I was trying to process the morning. Maybe I was afraid of what I'd find if I walked into our bedroom and saw her asleep like nothing had happened. But deep down, I already knew something wasn't right. And the truth was, this wasn't the first time. It was just the first time I'd stopped pretending it didn't matter. I sat there that night going back over the past few weeks, and suddenly it was like someone had turned on a projector in my mind. Scene after scene played out with new meaning. Things that hadn't made sense before, or that I'd chosen not to question, were suddenly glaring. 2 weeks ago, I'd gone to put something in the trunk of Maggie's car and noticed a pair of men's workout gloves. Not mine. They looked fairly new, one of those expensive brands I'd seen at the gym. At the time, I'd picked them up, turned them over, and thought maybe they were her brother's. She'd mentioned helping him move a few boxes. That's what I told myself. But when I asked her about them later, she looked confused for a second too long. Then she said she'd picked them up for me as a gift but forgot to give them to me. A joke, she called it, since she always teased me for skipping arm days. I'd even thanked her. Now I wasn't so sure. There'd also been the bar receipt I found wedged between the pages of a book in the back seat of her car. The Nest, it said, dated on a Thursday night. A small place downtown that we'd never been to together. When I asked her about it, she said it was from a work happy hour. Just a few drinks after a client presentation. But Maggie's job isn't the kind that involves happy hours. She's a landscape designer. Her days are usually spent with blueprints, nursery visits, or on-site consults. I'd met her coworkers at last year's holiday party. Most of them were introverts who couldn't wait to get back to their plants and pets. So why was she at a trendy downtown bar on a weeknight? I hadn't asked twice. There were other things, too. Subtler signs I didn't want to acknowledge before. Her phone always face down now. Not even on vibrate, completely silenced. A new habit. And then there were the nights she claimed her battery had died. Twice in 1 week. She'd come home late and said she forgot her charger. Both times her phone had less than 5% battery when I asked to call for dinner. Her voice had been casual. No stress, no guilt. She even made a joke about needing to get a backup power bank. I remember thinking, it happens. But now I wondered if those dead phones were really just turned off. Or if she needed them quiet long enough for someone else to exist uninterrupted. I started noticing how she smelled different when she got home on those late nights. Not perfume, Maggie never wore much of it. But sometimes there was a faint odor of cigarettes on her jacket or in her hair. She didn't smoke. Never had. Hated the smell, actually. So either she was spending time near someone who did. Or with someone who did. Even her schedule had shifted. She'd been staying late after work more often, saying she had new clients or needed to revise a project before submission. That alone wouldn't have raised suspicion if not for the inconsistencies. She'd say she had a meeting, but I'd check our shared calendar, and nothing would be there. Once, when I asked what the meeting was about, she paused and said it had been rescheduled anyway. All of it might have still passed for coincidence if not for the way she looked at me lately. Like she was trying to convince herself of something. Like she was playing a role, reciting lines she wasn't invested in. One night last week, we were watching a movie together, one of those old rom-coms she used to love. I'd looked over and caught her staring at me. Not in a romantic way, not even curious. It was more like she was watching someone fade away in front of her. She noticed me looking back and smiled, then reached for my hand. I let her take it, but I didn't feel anything. That same night, I had a dream where we were sitting across from each other at our dinner table. Everything looked normal. Food on the plates, glasses of wine, soft music playing in the background. But when I tried to speak, she didn't respond. She just smiled at me, then slowly began to dissolve, like sand blowing away in the wind. And I just sat there, unable to move, watching her disappear grain by grain. When I woke up, she was gone. She'd gotten up early for a client consult, she said. Left a note and everything. But even that felt rehearsed. The handwriting was neat, the message too careful. Good luck today. Coffee's in the pot. Love you. I didn't even drink it. I poured it out. Stood there in the kitchen watching it swirl down the drain. That was 3 days before I found the jacket and the wine glasses. Now, lying in bed beside her, I couldn't sleep. I kept going back to the jacket. Why would someone take a shower and leave without it? If Derek really was over to help with the thermostat, why wouldn't he take his jacket with him? Why wouldn't he say goodbye when I showed up? And the wine. Why was she drinking wine with someone at 6 a.m.? I turned my head and looked at her. She was asleep, back turned to me, one arm curled under the pillow like she was hiding something even in her dreams. I wondered how long this had been going on. Was it new? Recent? Some emotional affair that had only started turning physical? Or was I the one who'd been blind for months? Maybe longer. While she crafted an entirely separate life right under my nose, I thought about asking her, about sitting her down, calmly, and just saying, tell me the truth. But what if she didn't? What if she gave me another explanation that sounded almost real, just plausible enough to make me question myself again? No, I couldn't do that. Not yet. I needed to know the truth before I gave her the chance to bend it. So instead, I started keeping notes. Not just mental ones, real ones. In my phone, in a hidden folder, I began logging each odd moment. The times, the locations, her excuses, her body language, the things that didn't line up. It wasn't about revenge. I wasn't plotting anything. I just needed clarity. I needed evidence for myself if nothing else. Because I could feel myself unraveling. Not in some explosive, dramatic way. Quietly. Like a frayed thread that had been tugged for months and was finally coming loose. She was drifting away from me, and I was the only one who seemed to notice. I didn't know where this was heading. I didn't know if it would end in divorce or confrontation or some drawn-out unraveling of a life we had built together. But I did know this. I couldn't look away anymore. I was done pretending. It happened 3 days after I found the jacket. By then, I'd become someone I barely recognized. Watching, noticing, keeping track of small lies like a man collecting pennies for some final count that would either break him or vindicate him. I didn't even tell Chris. my closest friend and the one person who probably could have talked me off the ledge. I wanted to be sure before I said it out loud. Once you say it, I think she's cheating. You can't unsay it. It becomes real. It lives in the room with you, and I wasn't ready for that yet. That morning, I told Maggie I'd be gone till late. I had a meeting up in Round Rock, something she didn't even pretend to care about. She nodded, said she might run errands after work, maybe get groceries. "Don't wait up," she added, and kissed me on the cheek without making eye contact. I drove a few blocks, parked near the corner gas station, waited. I'd never done anything like that before. Stalked my own house. But something in me said, today's the day. I couldn't explain it. It was just a feeling. The kind you don't argue with anymore after weeks of doubting yourself. I waited almost 6 hours. Listened to the hum of the car engine. Watched as neighbors walked dogs and joggers passed by. Around 4 in the afternoon, a car I didn't recognize pulled into our driveway. It was silver, mid-sized, no plates I recognized. A man stepped out, mid-30s, tall, broad shoulders, dark jeans, casual polo, sunglasses. He didn't look around, just walked up to the front door like he belonged there. And a few seconds later, she opened it. She was smiling. Not polite smiling. Not neighborly smiling. Smiling like she was waiting for him. He leaned in, kissed her quickly on the lips, like they'd done it a dozen times, and then she pulled him inside. The door shut behind them like a period at the end of a sentence I didn't want to read. I sat there stunned. Not angry. Not yet. Just hollow. There it was. The thing I'd been circling for weeks. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. She was cheating on me. Right now, in the house we built together. Under the roof where we'd shared birthdays, holidays, sick days, and every small mundane Tuesday in between. I should have felt something explosive, rage, grief, panic. Instead, I felt clarity. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff and finally seeing the ground below. Terrifying, yes, but undeniable. You know what happens next. I didn't confront them. I didn't burst through the door or make a scene. I didn't want to give either of them the satisfaction of my heartbreak being loud. I needed control. I needed to own this next step. So I drove off, calm and steady, like I hadn't just watched my life split in half through a windshield. I didn't go far. Just drove up north, past downtown, toward the lake. Found a quiet spot near a boat ramp and sat on a bench overlooking the water. I don't know how long I was there. Long enough for the sun to start dipping and the first flickers of street lamps to come on behind me. I thought about all the ways I could react. I could storm in, yell, demand answers she wouldn't give. I could call her parents, call her sister, make it public. I could try to forgive her, salvage the wreckage like people sometimes do. But none of those paths felt right. What felt right was leaving. Not as an escape. Not as a punishment. As a decision. A quiet one. The kind you don't announce, you just make. Around 8 p.m. I drove home. Her car was there. His wasn't. Inside, the house was too quiet. She was upstairs. I didn't go up. Didn't ask anything. I went straight to the closet, grabbed the essentials. 2 duffel bags, a carry-on, and my laptop. I took what was mine and nothing more. Wallet, watch, documents, a couple of framed photos I couldn't leave behind. A jacket. Toothbrush, chargers, nothing sentimental. I didn't touch the wedding album. I didn't even glance at the drawers where our anniversary cards were stored. Those weren't mine anymore. Before I left, I placed the house key on the kitchen table. Right next to it, I scribbled a note on a post-it. Don't call. I'm okay. I'll be in touch later. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cruel. It was just final. I got in my car and drove to Portland. My old college roommate Chris had a spare room and had always told me I could crash there if I ever needed to hit reset. I texted him from a gas station outside Temple. Hey, you still got that spare room? He called immediately. Jesus, Roy, what happened? Can I just come by? He paused. Yeah, absolutely. I got to Portland just after midnight. Chris didn't ask too many questions. Just showed me the room, handed me a towel and said, "You can talk when you're ready." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the unfamiliar bed, surrounded by someone else's furniture, and stared at the ceiling. I kept thinking about how easy it had been to leave. How quick. Like all that love, all that trust, all that shared history could evaporate in under 10 minutes. But it hadn't evaporated. It had just rotted slowly. And by the time I'd seen it, it was already gone. That was the first night I truly felt alone. Not lonely, just unattached. No shared plans. No future to navigate. No lies left to untangle. Just me. And weirdly, that gave me comfort. The next morning, Maggie texted, "Where are you?" "No, are you okay?" "No, I'm sorry. Just where are you?" I didn't reply. Later that afternoon, she sent another message. "Can we talk?" I muted the thread, sat on the balcony with a cup of black coffee and watched cars pass by like none of this had ever happened. Took her 2 full days to send something with weight. "Please. I messed up. I know I did. Just talk to me." Still no apology. Still no acknowledgement. Just vagueness. Fear, maybe. I didn't respond. Not because I was punishing her, but because I had nothing to say that wouldn't start another cycle of avoidance. I wasn't interested in getting back to normal, because there was no normal. There hadn't been for a long time. On the 3rd day, she sent a picture of our dog, the one we adopted 5 years ago from a rescue in Bastrop. She said he kept sitting by the door. "He misses you." I stared at that message for a while. And then, for the first time since I left, I cried. Not because of the betrayal, but because of the things that had nothing to do with it, the dog. The home I used to know. The version of us I thought I was still part of. But I still didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and started looking for work. I called a real estate agent in Portland, asked about short-term leases. I told Chris I'd pay rent starting next week. I even joined a gym, not because I needed distractions, but because this was real now. I wasn't coming back. It was strange how quickly I adjusted to a new rhythm. You'd think leaving your marriage, your house, your city, your whole sense of identity, would feel like dropping off a cliff. But the truth was, it felt more like easing into cold water. Jarring at first, yes, but then your body adapts. You learn the temperature, and then you move. Chris's apartment in Portland wasn't big, just 2 bedrooms and an open living space that caught the late afternoon sun in a way I'd never noticed before. His couch had a permanent dent from where he usually passed out after watching basketball, and the kitchen was halfway through a renovation that had clearly lost steam a few months ago. But it felt more like home than my actual home did. In the mornings, I'd wake up early. No alarm. Just sunlight. Sometimes I'd sit out on the balcony with coffee and silence, listening to the city hum below. It was peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. And I didn't feel guilty about it. I didn't feel guilty about sleeping alone or not texting her back or not waking up to her soft excuses. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of my own story. The 3rd day in, Chris left early for work, and I decided to do something I hadn't done in over a year. I cooked. Nothing fancy. Just eggs, toast, some chopped avocado, and coffee that didn't taste like burnt resignation. I sat at the tiny kitchen table with a real plate, not a paper one, and I ate without distractions. No phone, no news, no Maggie's voice floating in from the next room reminding me of things I hadn't done. I just sat and ate and existed. Later that afternoon, I drove past a trail I used to hike when I was younger. I didn't plan to stop, but I did. Just parked and started walking. My legs remembered the path even when my brain didn't. The smell of pine and sun-warmed dirt, the distant sound of water over rocks. It was like finding a part of myself I'd let Maggie overwrite. Halfway through the loop, my phone buzzed. It was her. "You can't just disappear. This isn't fair." I stared at the message, not even angry, just tired. Fair? That word rang in my head like a bad joke. Where was fair when she poured wine for someone else in our kitchen? Where was fair when she laughed in someone else's arms while I sat in a parking lot watching my life collapse? I slipped the phone back into my pocket and kept walking. By the time I got back to the apartment, there were 2 more messages. "I know I screwed up, but we have a life together. Doesn't that mean anything? I didn't respond. I knew what came next. Bargaining, justifications, declarations of temporary insanity. Maybe even tears if she thought it might buy time. But I wasn't interested in time anymore. Time had already shown me everything I needed to know. That night, I dreamed I was back at our house. It looked the same, but the walls were thinner, see-through almost, like the place was built out of memory instead of wood. Maggie was in the kitchen, pouring 2 glasses of wine. But this time she looked directly at me. And then she handed one of the glasses to someone else. He was faceless, a silhouette, but they laughed. She laughed like I wasn't there, and I stood frozen in the doorway, unable to move, screaming silently while they clinked their glasses. I woke up soaked in sweat, didn't go back to sleep. On the 5th day, she called. I didn't answer. A few minutes later, another message came in. The front door lock is acting up again. Can you come fix it? I stared at the screen for a full minute. That was it. That was the moment. Because for years, that's who I'd been, her fixer, her rescuer, her reliable standby for every jam and every crisis, big or small. If the printer jammed, if the water heater sputtered, if her car battery died, she called me. And I showed up. Every time. No matter how hurt I was. No matter how ignored I'd felt that week. But not this time. This time I let the message sit there. I let her stare at those 3 little dots that never turned into a reply. I didn't tell her no. I didn't tell her anything. I just didn't show up. A few hours later, she followed up. Are you seriously ignoring me over a doorknob? I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it proved something. She still didn't get it. She still thought this was a hiccup, a phase, an inconvenience in an otherwise steady stream of Roy saves the day moments. But I wasn't hers anymore. I wasn't her emotional backup generator. I wasn't the quiet man in the corner absorbing the damage. That night, I started a list on my phone titled, Things I'm Not Going Back to. It was silly, maybe, but it helped. I wrote, apologizing for things I didn't do. Sleeping next to someone who's emotionally somewhere else. Fixing locks while she hands the keys to someone else. Listening to I'm sorry without change. Being needed but never wanted. I kept adding to it. The more I wrote, the lighter I felt. Chris noticed the shift. We were watching a game the next night when he glanced over and said, You look different. I shrugged. Feel different. You gonna tell me what happened? Eventually, I said. Not yet. He nodded. Well, when you do, I've got whiskey and time. That's the thing about good friends. They don't push. They just sit close enough for you to lean if you need to. That weekend, I looked up apartments in Portland. Not temporary ones. Real leases. 1-bedrooms with good light and hardwood floors and windows that didn't look out on anything familiar. Maggie sent another message Sunday morning. I don't want to fight. I just want to talk. Still no admission. Still no honesty. Still not one word about the man I watched her kiss from across my own lawn. I blocked her number. Felt final. But also necessary. I left the house because I saw her in someone else's arms. But I stayed gone because she still hadn't said his name. That was all I needed to know. It's strange how fast your brain adjusts when survival becomes the goal instead of routine. Back in Austin, I had my days mapped out like clockwork. Meetings, coffee windows, gym hours, dinner schedules, grocery lists. Every corner of my time was accounted for. But once I left Maggie, all of that disappeared. It didn't evaporate, it just became irrelevant. The first few days in Portland weren't loud. They weren't full of dramatic breakdowns or drunken escapades or any of the things movies make you think come after heartbreak. They were quiet, muted, and in some ways that was worse. I was still me, but a version of me I didn't recognize. Detached, drifting, aware of every second but emotionally underwater. The mornings started the same. I'd wake before sunrise, even though I didn't need to. Sit on the edge of the mattress in Chris's guest room, stare out the window, and try to feel something. But it was all fogged over. Like my emotions hadn't caught up to the facts. I didn't miss her. Not really. I missed the version of her I thought I had. And I hated that I couldn't separate the two. One morning, I found myself reaching for my phone out of pure habit. Not because I wanted to call her, but because for almost a decade, she was the first person I messaged when I woke up. Even if we were in the same house, even if we just argued, that tether didn't sever overnight. It snapped, and now the recoil was bruising parts of me I didn't know could bruise. I didn't text her. I just held the phone for a second, then set it face down. By day 4, I started walking every afternoon. Not for exercise, just to be around other people without having to speak to them. Downtown Portland is a patchwork of soft gray skies, warm smells from street carts, and passing faces that never linger. It's exactly what I needed. Movement without meaning. One afternoon, I ended up near the Powell's bookstore. Walked in out of instinct. Spent almost 2 hours inside, flipping through pages I didn't read, listening to the soft rustle of strangers searching for escape. I bought a book I didn't need, just so I wouldn't leave empty-handed. Back at Chris's place, I found myself cooking more. Not because I was hungry, because I missed feeling capable. It's a strange thing, but when your relationship dies, you start questioning everything you thought you were good at. Providing, supporting, loving. So I cooked. Simple meals. Clean ones. Stir-fries and lemon chicken and roasted vegetables that made the apartment smell like something good was happening. Chris noticed. "You always this domestic?" He joked one night, halfway through a plate of pesto pasta. I shrugged. "Helps me think." He paused, then said, "You're doing okay." I looked at him, surprised. "Seriously," he added, "you're not folding. That matters." I nodded, unsure how to respond. Because the truth was, I wasn't okay. But I was stable. And maybe that was good enough for now. At night, the silence got heavier. I'd lay in bed with my eyes open, thinking about the months that led up to everything unraveling. All the moments I'd misread. All the signs I'd dismissed. Like the time I'd made dinner reservations for our anniversary, and she forgot to block the night off her calendar. Claimed she had to stay late at work. Showed up 2 hours late with wine on her breath and an apology that sounded memorized. Or the weekend I suggested a getaway to the lake, and she told me she needed a weekend alone to recharge. I nodded. I believed her. I even told her I was proud she was setting boundaries. Now I wondered who she'd really gone to recharge with. And the worst part? I wasn't angry. I was just embarrassed. Embarrassed that I had shown up every day. Embarrassed that I'd worked so hard to make her life easier while she made mine irrelevant. That realization changed something in me. On day 6, I pulled out my laptop and started writing. Not to Maggie. Not to anyone. Just to myself. I wrote about the day I met her, the time she cried watching a commercial for animal shelters, the way she used to leave sticky notes in my suitcase when I traveled. I wrote about the first time I felt her pull away. I wrote about the wine glasses, the jacket, the silence. And when I was done, I sat back and looked at the screen and thought, none of that changes what she did. She could have been all those good things once. Maybe she was. Maybe she meant it in the beginning. But that version of her didn't survive. And the one who was left was someone who could betray me in the home I built for us. Later that evening, Chris came home and handed me a beer. "I ran into Kara at the store," he said, referring to his sister. I smiled faintly. "She still hate me?" "She never hated you. She just thinks you should have dumped Maggie 2 years ago." "She's not wrong." Chris sat across from me on the couch, propping his feet up on the coffee table. "She said something that stuck with me," he added. "Told me, some people mistake endurance for loyalty. Roy thought if he just kept holding on, she'd come back to him." I nodded, slowly. "She's right again," I said. "I kept thinking if I just kept showing up, she'd remember. And instead, she rewrote the story without me." That night, Maggie texted again. "I'm going to give you space, but I still love you. Still no truth. Still no ownership. Just emotional bait." I didn't reply. I deleted the message, then blocked her new number, too. I didn't need to hear from her again. Not until I heard the words that mattered. And honestly, maybe not even then. The next morning, I walked into a small co-working space 5 blocks from the apartment. Paid for a hot desk for the month. Didn't even have a job lined up. I just needed somewhere to go that wasn't borrowed. They gave me a seat by the window. I opened my laptop and stared at a blank screen for 20 minutes before finally typing the words. What happens to a man who gives everything to someone who stopped noticing? It wasn't a job application. It wasn't a journal entry. It was just a sentence. One that had lived in my bones for months. I saved the document, closed the laptop, and looked out the window. Life was moving again. And this time I wasn't chasing anyone.